There are some families that look perfect from the outside. Families with wealth, families with respect, families whose names open doors before they even speak. But sometimes the deadliest poison is not hatred, it is silence. And this story is about a family that drank from that silence for years without realizing it. Tonight, you're about to get the story of the bitter root, a story of blood, inheritance, resentment, and a daughter who slowly destroyed the man she loved the most. But before we begin, you need to understand the kind of family the Adeyemis were. The Adeyemis were not poor people. No, they were one of those old Nigerian families whose wealth carried weight even in silence. They had land, real land, the kind of land that stretches so far at sunrise that your eyes cannot find the end of it. Their compound stood like a kingdom in the middle of red earth and palm trees. Three generations had lived inside those walls, and still there were empty rooms. In their community, the Adeyemi's names meant power, it meant respect, it meant tradition. But as strong those words looked from the outside, something poisonous had begun growing inside them, and nobody noticed. 3 months before everything collapsed, Chief Emeka Adeyemi turned 70 years old. The celebration was massive. Goats were slaughtered. Music filled the compound. Drummers played until sunset painted the sky orange. And for one night, the family looked happy. His children sat around him proudly. Kunle, the eldest son, quiet, educated, and responsible. The type of man who looked stable even when the world was shaking. And then there was Bayo, handsome, restless, and always distracted. Always looking at his phone like his mind lived somewhere else. And then there was Shade, the observer, the quiet daughter who noticed everything but rarely spoke too quickly. But the most important person sitting there that night was Temi. Temi was the daughter who stayed behind. While the others traveled abroad, built careers, started new lives, Temi remained inside that family compound for 30 years. 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of caring for her father, 30 years of putting everyone else first. She worked before sunrise, handled family matters, managed the home, took care of her father's health, protected the family's name. And yet, nobody ever truly saw her. Nobody thanked her. Nobody celebrated her sacrifices. But deep inside her heart, Temi had started keeping count. 3 days after the birthday, Chief Adeyemi gathered his children inside the sitting room. The atmosphere was calm at first. He sat in an old carved wooden chair that was belonged to his father. Then he lifted a document into the air. A will. The room became silent. Chief Adeyemi spoke softly, firmly, like a man preparing his family for the future. He explained that after his death, everything was passed to Kunle, the land, the buildings, the accounts, the businesses, everything according to tradition. The eldest son would inherit all major family properties. Kunle nodded respectfully. Bayo barely looked up from his phone. Shade quietly watched everyone in the room. But then, her eyes stopped on Temi because Temi was smiling. Not the smile of surprise, not the smile of happiness. No, it was the smile of someone who had just arrived at the dangerous decision, and nobody in that room understood what that smile meant. It started with tea. That is how many terrible things begin. Not with violence, not with blood, not with scream, but with something small, something ordinary, something warm. Every evening, Temi brought her father a special herbal tea. At first, nobody questioned it. She had always taken care of him. So why would this be different? But one night, Shade noticed something strange. She entered the kitchen late at night looking for water, and there stood Temi, stirring a dark mixture inside a clay pot. The smell was strange, bitter, unfamiliar. Bundles of dried herbs covered the counter. The moment Temi noticed Sade, she quickly covered the pot. Too quickly. Temi smiled calmly and explained that it was herbal medicine for her father's joint. Sade wanted to believe her. She truly did. But something inside her refused to relax. And over the following weeks, their father began changing. Fast, very fast. The strong man who danced at his birthday now struggled to walk. The loud, powerful voice that once controlled the compound became weak. His hands trembled, his breathing slowed. The doctors blamed old age, blood pressure, stress, but Sade remembered the clay pot and she remembered Temi's smile. One night, unable to sleep, Sade sat on her bed, holding her phone in the dark, and finally, she searched the word she has been afraid to search. African herbs, slow poisoning, weakness in elderly men. The results terrified her. There were plants capable of destroying the body slowly over time, not immediately, not violently, slowly and quietly. The symptoms looked natural, like aging, like illness, like the body simply giving up. Shade felt cold because suddenly everything started making sense, and for the first time, she became afraid of her own sister. Before sunrise the next morning, Shade entered Temi's room, carefully, quietly. Her heart pounded against her chest. She moved towards an old wardrobe that once belonged to their dead mother, and hidden behind folded wrappers. She found it, bundles of herbs, a notebook, and receipts from distant album markets. But in the notebook was the worst part because it contained measurements, dates, calculations, everything written carefully in Temi's handwriting. This was not panic, this was planning. Sade's hand trembled violently as she photographed the evidence. Then suddenly, from somewhere deep inside the compound, she heard Temi humming softly, and for the first time in her life, Sade truly felt fear. The next morning, Shade walked into Temi's room without knocking. Temi sat quietly in front of her mirror. She looked at Shade through the reflection, then glanced once towards the wardrobe. And immediately, she understood. There was no shouting, there was no dramatic screaming, only silence, heavy silence. And then Temi confessed. She spoke about 30 years of sacrifices, 30 years of being invisible. She spoke about the marriage she lost because she stayed behind for the family, about watching her siblings live freely while she remained trapped inside the responsibility no one appreciated. Then she finally admitted the truth. She had wanted more time. Time for their father to reconsider the will. Time for him to recognize her sacrifices. She claimed she never meant to kill him, only weaken him, only slow him down. But by then, their father was already in the hospital, fighting for his life. And when Sade told her that his organs were began to fail, something inside Temi finally broke. Chief Adeyemi spent 11 days in the hospitals. Doctors worked desperately to stabilize him, and eventually he survived. On the ninth day, he asked to see all his children together. The room was painfully quiet. Temi stood slightly apart from the others, ashamed, broken. Then Chief Adeyemi reached into a drawer beside his hospital bed and removed another document, a second will. His voice was weak but clear. 3 months earlier, before the poisoning, before the birthday celebration, he had actually changed the inheritance. Temi's name was included equally beside her brother's. She already owned the shares she was fighting for. The sound Temi made in that room was not ordinary crying. It sounded like regret itself. She had poisoned her father for something that was already hers. Temi was arrested. The investigation became public. Journalists surrounded the compound. Neighbors whispered. The proud Adeyemi name became a symbol of tragedy. But even after everything, Chief Adeyemi visited Temi once in prison. Only once. He sat across from his daughter in silence, held her hand through the partition, and finally told her the words she has waited for 30 years to hear. You were never invisible to me. I was only slow in showing you. After the trial, Shade spent years asking herself one question. What if they had simply appreciated Temi sooner? What if someone had noticed her sacrifices? What if someone had spoken before resentment became poison? Because sometimes people do not break suddenly. Sometimes they break quietly, years after years, silently. And by the time anyone noticed, the damage is already done. They say the sweetest poison has no smell, but the bitterest poison of all is silence. And long before Temi touched that clay pot, this family had already been drinking from it for years.